So my name is Corinne, and this is my presentation on the Israeli far-right coalition and Benjamin Netanyahu as a religious extremism group. First, I'm going to provide some background on why I selected this topic, as well as the foundations of the Israeli far-right coalition and Benjamin Netanyahu's rise to power. So the reason I chose this topic is because of this alarming metric. There have been over 43,000 deaths in Gaza since September of 2023, many of which are civilians and children. Given this metric, I decided to further explore the conflict between Israel and Palestine and how the themes that we've discussed in class have tied into that conflict. So to provide some historical context, the Israeli conflict has been long-lasting since 1897 and existed in three main stages. Before the foundation of the State of Israel, the British government mandated the forceful immigration of Jewish citizens to the pre-habited state of Palestine. In response, this led to a series of conflicts and wars between 1947 to the current day. And there is currently a long-lasting conflict between Israel and the surrounding Arab countries due to this original forceful immigration. In response to the series of conflicts between Israel and Palestine, there was the foundation of the far-right coalition, or the Likud, which is an Israeli political party known as the National Liberal Movement. And it was founded in 1973 by prominent figures like Menachem Begin and Ariel Sharon to challenge the longstanding dominance of the Israeli Labor Party, and it is a major right-wing political party in Israel. Currently, this political party is headed by Benjamin Netanyahu, who was born in Israel in 1949. However, he intermittently lived in the US while serving in the Israeli military from 1967 through 1972. Following 1988, he held several ambassadorship positions before being elected to the Knesset, which is the Israeli parliament, as a Likud member. Notably, he is the longest-serving prime minister in Israel, with 3 terms spanning from 1996 all the way to the current day. And he holds a lot of these far-right coalition ideologies that are exhibited by the Likud party. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu and the far-right coalition exhibit several of the central themes that we've discussed in class, such as the concept of sacred land, literalism, Zionism, the establishment of the primary and secondary enemy, and the just war argument. So to dive in, the Jewish extremism movement, and specifically the far-right coalition and Benjamin Netanyahu, are based on these fundamental principles of sacred land and literalism. In the Torah, in Genesis 15:18 through 21, there's this quote that says, "To your descendants I give this land from the river of Egypt to the great river, the Euphrates," which in short is staking the Jewish claim to the land of Palestine, spanning from the river in Egypt to the Euphrates, which gives this foundation of having a divine right to this land, even though there are Arab and Palestinians currently inhabiting that land. Furthermore, there is an additional concept of the city on a hill, which originally was from a Puritan leader, John Winthrop. And the phrase suggests that a community that serves as a beacon of hope and moral example to the world. However, the far-right coalition and Benjamin Netanyahu have further amplified this concept and started several subgroups, such as the Hilltop Youth, which has this very notable quote where it says, "Every hill is a territory in the land of Israel. Every hill must be conquered." So this quote is exemplifying that these extremist groups believe that they have a divine right to this land and they must conquer it by any means necessary. These fundamental principles tie into the Zionistic ideology, which in short is a nationalistic movement that aims to establish a Jewish homeland in Palestine. Netanyahu exhibits several Zionistic themes and concepts, one of which is his support for settlement expansion. He has constantly advocated for the expansion of the Israeli settlement in the West Bank, even though it's currently inhabited, because of this divine right and sacred land theme and concept. Furthermore, he and the far-right coalition have an opposition to Palestinian statehood, as well as they use historical narratives such as the Torah and biblical narratives to justify the Jewish claims to the land. His speeches often emphasize the ancient connection of Jews to Israel, which is a core tenet of Zionist ideology. Lastly, and most importantly, the military actions of Netanyahu and the far-right coalition exemplify these Zionistic ideologies. Under his leadership, Israel has engaged in military operations aimed at countering these perceived threats from Palestinian groups, which they frame as necessary for the survival of the Jewish state. So moving forward into the next theme, which is the establishment of the primary and secondary enemy, the far-right coalition and Netanyahu often portray Palestinians as adversaries to the Jewish sovereignty over the land. Given the longstanding conflict, the far right utilizes the actions of Arab terrorist groups such as Hamas and Hezbollah as proof for the enemy status of the greater Palestinian population. Furthermore, and very interestingly enough, this movement also establishes a secondary enemy, which, as we discussed in class, is somebody that is not extreme enough and lies within the same religious group, but is not extreme enough or meeting the expectations of the greater group. A key example of this is on October 5th in 1995, several members of the far right protested the standing Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin for signing the Oslo Accords, which were a peace treaty between Israel and Palestine. Netanyahu actually gave a speech at these protests that have been claimed to inspire Rabin's assassin. Next is the just war argument. Benjamin Netanyahu and the far right frame their military actions as necessary obligations to protect the Jewish people and the state of Israel from harm. While the just war theory originally includes principles of proportionality and discrimination, which in short means protecting civilians and not engaging in harmful war, the far right argues that the urgency of self-defense should overshadow these ethical considerations. So that ties into the larger theme of this class, as well as the specific movement of defense, where this group is justifying their religious violence through the lens of defending the state of Israel, through defending the Jewish people. A quote that I think is very exemplary of this is from Benjamin Netanyahu, where he says, "If the Arabs put down their weapons today, there would be no more violence. If the Jews put down their weapons today, there would be no more Israel." Now, this quote is very inflammatory and very much bolsters that defense ideology where they are defending themselves against the perceived Arab threat. Next, we're going to move into some comparisons between the far-right coalition and other extremist groups. And the group I selected to look at was the Christian nationalism movement, which exhibits similarities as well as differences to the Jewish extremism movement. So both Netanyahu and Christian nationalists emphasize the importance of a national identity intertwined with religious beliefs. Specifically, both of these groups evoke biblical narratives to justify policies and territorial claims. Both groups also establish a primary enemy or other that is a perceived threat. Now, a key example of this is from a Christian nationalist politician, Mark Robinson, who, quote, said, "We need to kill the enemies of Christian America." Now, this is an example of establishing that primary enemy. Now, moving into some differences, while both groups share similarities in nationalism and core enemies, Christian nationalism is ideological in nature, which means that Christian nationalists view their battle as spiritual, as cultural, as creating a Christian America. However, Netanyahu's movements and the far-right coalition are centric to that sacred land acquisition and landmass acquisition. A quote that exemplifies this difference is from a Christian nationalist, David Barton, who said, "We are in a spiritual battle for the soul of our nation." So the Christian nationalist argument is very much centric around this spiritual soul basis. So now moving into the future outlook of the far-right coalition and Benjamin Netanyahu, we are currently in a perceived turning point. The political stability of the far right and Benjamin Netanyahu's power is wavering. The coalition has faced significant internal disagreements and public discontent. And Netanyahu's leadership has been questioned following security failures and the ongoing conflicts. This could lead to further instability within the coalition, which is not aided by the current public sentiment. Netanyahu's popularity has significantly declined after the October 7th attacks, which many Israelis blame on his government's failures. This shift in public opinion may pressure the coalition to adapt policies or face electoral consequences. Similarly, the security and military in Israel is under intense scrutiny. The coalition's approach to security regarding the Palestinian territories will likely remain aggressive in the next few years. However, the morality of these actions is under intense scrutiny. This could impact both domestic and international support. Lastly, and most importantly, the death toll in Gaza and Lebanon has reached over 50,000 people, many of whom are children and civilians. The humanitarian crisis is very severe, with widespread destruction of infrastructure, homes, and hospitals, leading to critical shortages of food, water, and medical supplies. So currently, this government is facing a lack of support for the genocide and severe military actions that they're evoking upon Palestine and surrounding Arab countries. And while this action is rooted in religious extremism, on the larger geopolitical scheme, there may be incoming changes. Thank you for listening to my presentation today. And this presentation was inspired by an NPR podcast that I listened to, which I've included the QR link to here on this last slide. And it provides a very informative, in-depth analysis of Benjamin Netanyahu's rise to power and the Israeli far-right coalition. Awesome. And then here are my references, and thank you so much.